So fellas, a hot MMA take is a take that you have that most people disagree with, basically like an unpopular opinion, and I've asked you guys to send in some hot MMA takes for me to react to, so I'm going to be going through some of them, grading them on a system of kind of agree, somewhat disagree, and then just plain disagree. There are some takes in there that I completely agree with, I think shouldn't really be unpopular, and then there's some that are basically the opposite, you know, they're unpopular opinions, they should stay unpopular. And we'll go in there with the first one, which is that Islam Makhachev is a top 5 GOAT. When it comes to Makhachev being a GOAT, I definitely think he's a top 10. Now, whether I would put him in the top 5, personally, I would disagree. I wouldn't put Makhachev in my personal top 5 GOAT list. I think having Makhachev in the top 5 GOAT list isn't a bad thing. If I saw somebody's GOAT list and they had Makhachev at number 5 or in the top 5, I wouldn't be mad. But me, personally, I think he's got a little bit more work to do. Now, if we look at his resume, he's got a super impressive resume in the short amount of time, beating Volk twice, beating Olivera in his prime, beating Poirier, beating Dan Hooker, beating Sarukian as well a few years ago, but we're comparing him and saying that he's above the likes of Aldo, you know, Anderson Silva, Demetrius Johnson, GSP, Jones, he's getting with those guys. People have been reigning their division for years, decades even. People who've got some of the most title defenses in UFC history, people who are legends in their own division, and there's even an argument to make that Makhachev's not even the lightweight GOAT, never mind in the top 5 greatest of all time list. He's only beaten 4 current ranked lightweights as well. The Sarukian one was way back in 2018 when Sarukian debuted, so even that one could be ran back. I think if Makhachev gets 1 or 2 more title defenses, I would put him in the top 5. Maybe if he moves up to the welterweight division and gets double champ status, he'd definitely be in the top 5 if Belal Muhammad loses his belt to like Shavkat or Ian Gary. But as of right now, I don't think it's a bad take to have Makhachev in the top 5 GOAT list, but me personally, I think it's a bit of a stretch. I'd put him in the top 10, wouldn't personally put him in the top 5, so I'm going to somewhat disagree with that take. The next one is that Belal Muhammad comfortably beat Shavkat. I agree with this take. I somewhat agree with this take. I've been saying for the longest time that Belal Muhammad beat Shavkat. Ever since this fight was even a thing, I've been saying that I think I'm going to go with Belal Muhammad. Not like, I'm not super confident that Belal Muhammad wins, but I'm leaning towards him. I think people hype up Shavkat more because of his record and the fact that he's undefeated and he's finished everyone, rather than his actual performances. So I'm going to somewhat agree with this take. I think Belal Muhammad beat Shavkat. I don't think he does it comfortably though. Like, I don't think we can ever look at Belal Muhammad and say that he comfortably beats anyone. I don't think he dominates Shavkat like he did with Leon. I definitely don't think he finishes Shavkat. I'm not even just trying to make a joke, but I don't think he does. I mean, Shavkat's stylistically difficult, got great jiu-jitsu, great submission game, clearly super dangerous, quite difficult to beat on the feet, crafty as well, so I don't think it's going to be an easy fight for Belal Muhammad, but between the two of them, I would favour Belal Muhammad. Now, maybe Shavkat shows me something against Ian Gary which changes my mind. If he goes out there and finishes Gary, maybe it would change my mind. But as of right now, I still think Belal Muhammad beat Shavkat. He went out there and beat Leon Edwards, stylistically one of the most difficult fights for him in the division. A guy with great takedown defense and better striking than Shavkat. And Belal Muhammad was beating him everywhere. And Shavkat's not even beating a top contender. If you look at the top 10 of the welterweight division, Shavkat hasn't beaten anybody. He hasn't beaten a single top contender as of right now. So at the time of me recording this, before Shavkat and Gary, I do think Belal Muhammad beat Shavkat. Maybe not comfortably, but I still think he beats him. I somewhat agree. The next take is that Pantoja should be higher in the pound for pound ranking. I completely agree with this. I think Pantoja should definitely be higher on the pound for pound list. He's number 11. At number 11 on the pound for pound list, Pantoja, I'm going to go out and say out of every champion right now in the UFC, Pantoja has cleared out his division better than everyone. If you look at his resume in the flyweight division, he's beat Brandon Moreno 3 times, he's beat Royval twice, he's beat Manel Kape, Kai Kara-France, Steve Erceg, Matt Schnell, Alex Perez. He's done a better job at clearing out his division than any other champion right now in the UFC. We're having to bring in dudes from different promotions to even look for a fight for Pantoja. He has cleared out the flyweight division after he beats Asakura, or if he beats Asakura. There's genuinely nobody left in the flyweight division. There's no, that people keep complaining saying that Pantoja's inactive. That's the division's fault. There's no one for Pantoja to fight. So I completely agree. I think he should be higher in the pound for pound ranking. Having it at number 11 is criminal. I think he could be number 8, maybe even number 7 behind Dricus, maybe even above Dricus du Plessis if you're talking about the amount of people he's beaten. So yeah, I definitely think Pantoja should be higher. Number 11 is horrible for Pantoja. Cleared out the flyweight division. There's even an argument you can make that he could go up and fight at 135 against Merab as well. So I completely agree. Should be higher in the pound for pound ranking. Having him at number 11 is atrocious. The next take is that with wins over O'Malley, Cejudo, Yan and Aldo, Merab should be considered the bantamweight GOAT. I've been seeing this take a lot recently in the MMA community of Merab being the greatest bantamweight of all time, and I'm going to have to disagree. I get it. He's had some really good wins, and people kind of factor in title defenses a lot more than actual quality of opponents. But if you go through all of those guys right there, Jose Aldo, he was an out-of-prime Aldo, not necessarily a washed Aldo, but out of his prime, and he didn't dominate him like he did with PTN. He just held him up against the cage, and that's not even me trying to make an excuse for the grappling, but that's literally all he did. Held him against the cage, I don't think he landed a single takedown the entire fight. It was just holding Aldo against the cage, ruined the card. On top of that, he beat Cejudo, but it was a washed-up Cejudo coming off a loss and a layoff. Remember, Cejudo took 2 years off the sport, came back, lost to Aljamain Sterling, then he fought Merab. The PTN win was a good win. Yan had already lost to Aljo and O'Malley at the time, but it was still a good win. And then the Sean O'Malley can't really take anything away. Respectable win. But we're comparing him to Dominic Cruz, who in my opinion is the bantamweight god, who beat prime Demetrius Johnson, prime juiced-up Dillashaw, prime Uriah Faber, prime Benavidez. These are the guys that Dominic Cruz are beating in their prime, on sauce. He's basically had a massive reign as well, massive title reign if you count WEC. Never lost a belt as well. He just got injured, came back and won it straight back as well. So I think prime Dominic Cruz, I think Cruz is the bantamweight god in my opinion. Merab, maybe if he gets a couple of more defenses. I think there's even an argument to make that TJ Dillashaw, if you ignore the steroids, is above Merab as well because of what he's done in the bantamweight division. So I'm going to disagree. I think Cruz is still above Merab, but I think Merab is definitely top 5, maybe even top 3 greatest of all time at bantamweight. But if you really break down each and every one of those wins, it's not as impressive as it looks on paper, apart from maybe the O'Malley and the Yan one. The next one we've got is that Pantoja is by far the most deserving fighter on the roster for a bantamweight title shot, especially if he beats Asakura. Yeah, I'm going to somewhat agree with this. Like I just said, he's cleared out the flyweight division. There's genuinely nobody left for Pantoja to fight in the flyweight division. Like, after he beats Asakura, who does he fight? Like, Kai Kara France? He's already beaten him before. There's no one for him to fight. Tatsuro Taira was the only good contender, and he's just been beaten by Royval. So there's no one for Pantoja. And if you look at all the double champs or guys who attempted double champ, Volkanovski had 4 defenses when he fought Makhachev. Adesanya had 3 defenses when he fought Jan Blachowicz. When Cejudo moved up to fight Moraes, he had 1 defense. If Pantoja can go out there and beat Asakura, he's going to have 3 defenses, and him versus Merab could genuinely be a possibility that nobody's really talking about, and I think it could be a good fight to make if Pantoja does get past Asakura. He's been talking about moving up to 135 before against O'Malley. Now, obviously, O'Malley's not the champion, but if he does want to move up to 135, I think because of what he's done at flyweight, he can make that claim, and I wouldn't mind seeing Pantoja go up to 135. I still think Merab beats him, which is why I only somewhat agree, and I don't think it'd be a super fight like some of the other kind of double champ fights out there, and I'm not a fan of every single time a champion defends a few times they move up a weight class, but I think out of all the current champions, Pantoja is probably the most deserving one, so I would agree with this, or at least somewhat agree. The next take we have is that Jon Jones isn't top 5 of all time regardless of steroids. If you're saying regardless of steroids, I can kind of understand when people say that Jones isn't one of the GOATs because of steroids, but if you're saying regardless of steroids, he's not even in the top 5, yeah, I'm going to disagree with this take. If we go through every one of those points you've just made, he's a serial ducker. I can't argue with that. He is a serial ducker, I agree. He lost to one knee Santos and robbed Reyes. I don't think he lost to Santos. I would have definitely favoured Jones in that fight against Santos. Even though it was closer than it should have been, he still won the fight. The Reyes one was an outright robbery, though, I'll give you that. He has trash boxing, trash pocket defense, trash footwork, and somewhat poor open space takedown shots. On the boxing thing, I agree. Jones is a terrible boxer. He's never had good boxing, never had good power. He's always struggled with boxing, but you can't really use that to take away from his legacy and what he's done and his achievements when nobody's been able to stop it. Like, I guess Dominic Reyes was able to do it, but apart from Reyes, nobody's been able to beat Jones. Nobody's been able to get past that terrible boxing of Jon Jones, so you can't really use it as a way to critique him. Yes, he's not really the most well-rounded guy. Well, he's well-rounded, but he's definitely not got the best boxing. But you can't really use it to critique him when nobody's been able to get past him. And saying he's beat a bunch of washed-up previous generation fighters, midget and journeyman, well, you can kind of use that to critique every goal. Like Demetrius Johnson, you can say that he fought bums and he was in the easiest flyweight era. There are people that said that if Demetrius Johnson was fighting in the current flyweight division, he wouldn't be a champion. I disagree, but there's some you can use that as an excuse. GSP lost to Hendricks, Serra, and Hughes. I mean, losing to Matt Serra alone, some people take away GSP from being one of the GOATs, and he did lose to Jordy Hendricks if we're talking robberies. He came back to fight the easiest middleweight. I mean, he didn't fight the tough middleweights. He fought Bisping, and he barely won fights. You can say that he was winning by the skin of his teeth. Anderson Silva, roided up, fought cans, massive losing streaks. You can kind of use that to every single UFC GOAT. I know if you add it up, it kind of looks bad for Jon Jones, but not even putting him in the top 5. Maybe I can see where you're coming from if you don't want to put him number 1, but not even put him in the top 5 if you take away steroids. I'm just going to have to disagree with that take. I know he's kind of not overrated, but I know he's not the perfect fighter. He's got a lot of flaws in and out the octagon, but I'd definitely put Jones in the top 5 of all time if you're not going to count steroids. Next one we've got is that welterweight is the best UFC division. I actually somewhat agree with this take. I think welterweight's one of the best. I don't fully agree because I still think bantamweight and lightweight hold the throne for being the best divisions in the UFC, but welterweight is a division that has kind of turned around in this past year, and I actually really like this division. I mean, look at the amount of contenders in this division. You've got Shavkat, JDM, Sean Brady, Ian Gary, Buckley. You've got all these contenders, and you've even got Leon Edwards, Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington at the top as well, that are still in the mix. They've all got fight. Well, Colby's got to fight Buck. Leon's still in the game. Usman said he wants to fight again. And if you go down the rankings, you've got the likes of Carlos Prates, a massive prospect. Michael Morales, a prospect. You've got the likes of MVP, Jeff Neal, Stephen Thompson, who were always in fun fights as well. So I think as a division, it's really interesting. You look at the other up-and-coming fights we've got a welterweight. Shavkat versus Gary, undefeated versus undefeated #1 contender fight. Can't wait for that at 310. Buckley versus Covington, the return of Covington against an up-and-coming Buckley. I think welterweight is probably one of the best divisions in the UFC, so I'm going to have to agree. I think it's top 3 best in the UFC right now, just behind bantamweight and lightweight, so I agree. I think welterweight's not necessarily an underrated division, but it's definitely one of the best. I don't know if this is a hot take, and if it is, I definitely agree. Women fights are exciting. We will see all 4 of the main fighting nerds as champion at some point. Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree. I like the fighting nerds. I think they are the best gym in the UFC. They've got a bunch of fun fighters that are obviously doing well. But to say they're all going to become a champion, I think is way too early to say this. I mean, if you look at all 4 of the main fighting nerds, I mean, Gene Silver has had some good wins in the UFC, beating Drew Dober and Charles Jourdain. But we don't know how far he's going to go in the featherweight division. He hasn't beaten a single ranked featherweight yet. He looks good. Looks like he's got a lot of potential, but it's way too early to say. Carlos Prates, again, on an absolute tear right now in the UFC. One of the best strikers in the 170 division. Just slept Neil Magny brutally. But how is he going to do when he faces a grappler? We saw Magny give him grappling problems. We've seen other people in the UFC previously give him grappling problems. I don't think he gets past some of the higher level grapplers in the division. Personally, I don't think he becomes a champion. Caio Borralho probably has the best chance because he's in the top 5. But apart from Borralho, I mean, Mauricio Hoofy, I mean, we can't even mention him. It's way too early. The dude just went to a decision with James Lontop. We could talk about him becoming a champion. I'm going to have to disagree. Yes, they are the best gym in the UFC right now. They've got a bunch of prospects and fighting nerds, but to say they're all going to become a champion, it's not even guaranteed that one of them is going to become a champion. I mean, we've not really seen any of them face anyone completely elite yet, so yeah, I disagree with this take. The next one is that Sean O'Malley never touches a belt again. Yeah, I agree. I don't think O'Malley's going to become a champion again. I think Merab not necessarily dominated him, but Merab did enough in that fight to convince me that if they were to ever have a rematch, I don't see why it would go any differently. Merab imposed his game plan perfectly against O'Malley. I think even Nurmagomedov, who's probably going to become a champion, would give an even tougher fight to Sean O'Malley than Merab did. I think even Sandhagen could beat Sean O'Malley. I'm not saying he would, but I think Sandhagen stylistically is a really tough fight for O'Malley. And you've got to remember, coming up to the title picture, O'Malley didn't have the toughest road. Yes, he had a tough fight against PTN, which most people would say he lost. But before that, he got the fight with PTN after getting a no contest over Pedro Munoz, which he was actually losing the fight on the judges' scorecard. So I agree. Sean O'Malley never touches a belt again. Yes, he's still one of the best, best bantamweights in the world. I think he can definitely pull off a win. I think he can definitely fight for a belt again, but I don't see him getting past Usman Nurmagomedov. I don't see him getting past Merab again unless he lands like a Hail Mary shot. I think even Sandhagen's a difficult fight for O'Malley, so I would agree. As good as O'Malley is and as fun as he is to watch, I don't think he becomes a champion again unless he gets an immediate rematch against Merab and lands a Hail Mary shot, because if otherwise, Nurmagomedov's going to become a champion, and there's no way that O'Malley's beating him, in my opinion. The next one is that with how much he's cleared out the heavyweight division, Tom Aspinall should be top 4 in pound-for-pound rankings, only behind Islam Makhachev and Jones. I don't know why he put a comma in between Islam and Makhachev, but I disagree. Listen, I'm a big Aspinall fan. I've been called a massive Aspinall glazer on this channel. If you know me, you'll know that I'm a massive Tom Aspinall fan. But he's an interim champion in the least competitive division. Maybe not an interim champion. I'm going to count him as the actual champion. Jones is ducking him. But heavyweight is the least competitive division in the UFC. Like, if you look at all the guys who are above Tom Aspinall right now in the pound-for-pound list behind Makhachev and Jones and all those guys, Toporia's knocked out Alexander Volkanovski, knocked out Max Holloway, submitted Bryce Mitchell, undefeated, beat what's his name, Josh Emmett as well. He's definitely above Tom Aspinall. Belal Muhammad's got 5 wins in the rankings of the welterweight division. He beat Leon, who was pound for pound one of the best. Gilbert Burns, Sean Brady, Stephen Thompson, Lukey. I think he's above him as well. Dricus du Plessis' past 3 fights is him finishing Robert Whittaker, beating the champion Sean Strickland for the belt, and finishing Israel Adesanya. And you've got Merab, who, even though earlier on in this video I went about how some of his wins might not be the best, I mean, O'Malley, Yan, Cejudo, and Aldo, I think he's above Tom Aspinall's resume. And even though Aspinall has literally cleared out the heavyweight division, he is the king of heavyweight, the competition just ain't the same. Like, if you compare Aspinall's best win right now, which is Curtis Blades, in my opinion, you can't really compare that to the other guys' best win in the likes of Volk and Leon and O'Malley and Adesanya. It just isn't the same. As good as Aspinall is, and he's definitely the best heavyweight right now, I believe he's the only guy in the pound-for-pound list to never touch undisputed gold. I can't put him at number 4 in the pound-for-pound rankings. Yes, he's cleared out the heavyweight division, but you can't compare heavyweight to like bantamweight and featherweight in my opinion. So as big as a fan as I am with Aspinall, I'm not going to be delusional. I disagree with this take. The next one, Islam is already better than Khabib. I agree. I think Makhachev's above Khabib. The biggest arguments you can have for Khabib being one of the GOATs or being above Makhachev is that he's never lost and he's never bled. I never really understood the whole never bled thing. Like, was Marlon Vera a GOAT before he fought O'Malley because he never bled? I don't see how that's relevant to being the GOAT. But Makhachev's 26-1. He's lost once. Are you saying just because he got knocked out by Martins years ago, he's now completely disqualified from being above Khabib in the GOAT list? I mean, if you go resume for resume between the two of them, they've both beaten Dustin Poirier. Charles Olivera is the next best win in my opinion for Makhachev, whereas for Khabib it's McGregor. Then you've got Volkanovski twice for Makhachev, and you've got Gaethje for Khabib. And then the next two best wins for Makhachev is Sarukian a couple of years ago and Dan Hooker, whereas Khabib, it's Edson Barboza and Rafael dos Anjos. I think he's got a better resume than Khabib. On top of that, he's more well-rounded, definitely has better striking than Khabib, as well as having that dominant grappling as well. So I agree. I think Makhachev's better than Khabib, not only from a skills perspective, but also from a resume perspective. Khabib didn't do enough in the division. Defending your belt against McGregor, Gaethje, and Poirier only, in my opinion, isn't enough to be above what Makhachev's done already. So I would agree with this take. The next one is that Prime Charles Oliveira beats Prime Khabib. Now, before you Khabib fans get salty, I disagree with this take. I disagree. I know I just shat on Khabib for not being above Makhachev, but I disagree with this take that Oliveira beats Khabib. Back in 2021, when Oliveira was the champion and Khabib had just vacated the belt, I was actually thinking as this matchup as a super fight. I was more intrigued in this matchup than the potential Ferguson versus Khabib matchup. But after I've seen Charles, after you've seen Charles Oliveira go out there and submit Justin Gaethje and knock people out on the feet and show off how well-rounded he is, this was a super fight in my opinion, and it would have been a really tough fight for Khabib. But after I've seen Islam Makhachev go out there and dominate Oliveira with the grappling, and how we've seen Makhachev handle Oliveira, and even Sarukian, how he was able to not dominate but out-grapple Oliveira with wrestling, I think Prime Khabib would easily do this to Oliveira. Prime Khabib, in my opinion, is the most dominant, or at least one of the most dominant wrestlers we've ever seen in the UFC. Yes, above Makhachev and Sarukian too. I think Khabib would have a field day with grappling in the wrestling department against Charles Oliveira. Yes, Oliveira has a submission threat, but what is the likelihood of Oliveira pulling off a submission against Khabib? And yes, he's better on the feet, but I don't think I don't think Khabib's going to give him a chance to strike with him, so I disagree. I think Khabib would take down Oliveira, basically mauling with the wrestling based off what I've seen with Oliveira versus Sarukian and Oliveira versus Makhachev. So I think Prime Khabib beats Prime Charles Oliveira. The next take is that Kamaru Usman did not fight elite competition during his title reign. I'm going to have to somewhat agree and also somewhat disagree with this take. Because if you go through Usman's title reign, he beat Woodley for the belt, he beat Covington twice, he beat Masvidal twice, he beat Gilbert Burns. And I know a lot of people are going to make the argument that those guys ain't elite, like Covington 2 times and Masvidal 2 times in your title reign. Basically just giving you 3 wins there isn't the most elite, but you've got to remember, this was the most elite competition for Usman at the time. Like, Masvidal coming into the first Usman fight had come off a knockout win, a fastest knockout in UFC history over Ben Askren, a knockout over Darren Till. He'd beaten the shit out of Nate Diaz for the BMF belt. When Colby was fighting for the belt, he was on this massive winning streak. When Gilbert Burns was fighting for the belt, he was on this massive winning streak. So the guys that Usman were fighting, it was the best competition at the time. Maybe if you compare that to today's welterweight division, yes, it's completely different. Maybe if Usman was fighting in today's welterweight division, he wouldn't be the champion, but he was fighting the best competition he had at the time. You can't really blame Usman for that, but that is me reacting to some hot takes, going through some of them, agreeing and disagreeing. Let me know if you agree with my assessment on these hot takes, and if you agree with some of the takes in this video. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching.